Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a genuinely thrilling mission, actually. I've been wading through this. Well, I mean, it's just a massive stack of sources on the desk here.
It really is a mountain of reading.
Yeah, exactly. We are talking about ancient philosophical scriptures from thousands of years ago, the highly practical teachings of contemporary mystics, and a really fascinating pile of modern psychological and ecological research.
Right.
And the craziest part about looking at all these wildly different fields, they are all pointing a massive blinking neon sign toward one mind-bending, reality-altering concept.
It's a concept that, if you truly entertain it, it forces you to reconsider literally everything about how you experience a mundane Tuesday morning. We are talking about non-duality.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Non-duality, if we translate it literally from its original roots, it simply means not to.
Exactly, not to.
But reading through the modern scholars in our sources, they define it as a state where the classic boundary between the subject, meaning you, the observer sitting there listening to this, and the object, the world you're looking at, is fundamentally diminished.
Mm-hmm.
It's this realization that all these apparent divisions are actually arising in one unbroken, cohesive reality.
And, I think it can sound like a very dense, almost abstract academic theory at first glance.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like something for a university seminar.
Right. But the sources highlight that this is actually a highly practical, grand, unified framework.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people aren't just debating this in ivory towers. They are actively using this exact framework today to radically reduce their anxiety, to dissolve the rigid boundaries of the ego, and to cultivate this level of deep, spontaneous empathy that, well, it completely transforms how they interact with the world around them.
So if you're listening to this right now and thinking, why should I care about some ancient philosophical buzzword? Well, this is about how you experience your own life. It's about your stress levels, your sense of isolation, and your connection to literally everything around you. But to truly get it, I feel like we have to start at the roots.
Definitely.
I was looking through the notes on the Eastern foundations of this idea, and Advaita Vedanta from India comes up heavily. There's a specific Sanskrit phrase in the research, Tat Tvam Asi. The translation provided is, thou art that. Am I reading that right? Does it literally mean you are the universe you're looking at?
That is the literal translation, yes. And it is a massive paradigm shift. Advaita Vedanta is an incredibly robust starting point because it doesn't just, throw out poetic phrases. It breaks this entire philosophy down into three core postulates.
Okay, lay them on me.
So the first is Brahman Satyam, which posits that only the absolute, this underlying foundational reality is truly real.
Hold on. If only this invisible absolute is real, what about the desk I'm sitting at?
Right, the classic objection.
Because that brings us to the second postulate in the notes, Jagat Mithya, which suggests the world as we perceive it is an apparent illusion. I have to push back here. If everything is an illusion, doesn't that just lead straight to nihilism? I mean, why should I care about my job or my family or climate change if it's all just a fake projection?
That is the most common trap people fall into when approaching this. And the texts anticipate that exact friction.
Yeah.
To understand Jagat Mithya, think of it like a movie projected on a screen in a theater.
Okay.
When you're watching a film, you get totally lost in the characters, the car cases, the heartbreak. You feel real adrenaline.
Oh, yeah, your heart rate actually goes up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you walk up to the front of the theater and touch the movie, it's just light on a blank canvas. The screen is the only actual enduring reality. The movie is an illusion only in the sense that it isn't what it appears to be. It's not a physical car chasing another physical car. It's a projection.
Oh, I see. So it's not that the world doesn't exist. It's that it doesn't exist in the separate, compartmentalized way my brain thinks it does.
Precisely. Which leads directly to the third postulate that completely saves this from nihilism. Jivo Brahmaiva na apara.
And that means...
This translates to the individual self is none other than Brahman. The character in the movie is the screen.
Wow.
You aren't a meaningless ghost in a fake world. You are the fundamental reality playing a specific role. It's not nothing. It's everything.
That reframing completely changes the tone. And reading further into the stack, Buddhism approaches this same truth from a different angle. There's a famous line from the Mahayana Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form.
Right, the Heart Sutra.
To a modern ear, that sounds like a riddle. How does equating form with emptiness actually help us understand reality?
In Buddhism, emptiness or shunyata doesn't mean a dark, depressing void. It means that all phenomena lack an independent, isolated essence. A tree isn't just a tree.
What do you mean?
Well, it's sunshine, soil, rain, and the carbon dioxide you exhale. If you take away the 9 tree elements, the tree disappears. Therefore, its form is empty of an independent self. The Heart Sutra is collapsing the distinction between substance and the interconnected web of reality.
I see. That makes perfect sense. And looking at the Chinese philosophies in our sources, Taoism echoes this beautifully.
Yeah.
Laozi famously wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "The Tao that can be called is not the eternal Tao."
That quote perfectly illustrates the limitation of human language. Anytime you try to use a word or concept to box reality in, you've immediately dualized it. You've created this versus that.
Right.
But the Tao itself is the undifferentiated whole. Think about yin and yang. We often mistakenly view them in the West as opposing forces locked in a cosmic battle, good versus evil, light versus dark.
Right, like they are competing for dominance.
But Taoism insists they aren't enemies at all. They are entirely complementary aspects of a single integrated process. You can't have the concept of a shadow without the concept of light. They rely on each other to exist, proving they are two sides of the same coin.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if you are listening to this, you might be tempted to categorize all of this as strictly an Eastern philosophical phenomenon, but the sources showed that the West arrived at the exact same conclusion completely independently.
Yes, they absolutely did.
Let's look at ancient Greece. The Neoplatonists, specifically Platonists, talked at length about something he called the One.
Plotinus described the One as a perfect, boundless unity beyond all being from which all reality emanates. He argued that any division we perceive is just a dilution of that singular source.
And it doesn't stop in ancient Greece.
No, if you move forward in time to the Middle Ages, you see this explicitly in Christian mysticism. Meister Eckhart is a prime example.
I was reading his quotes. He described a union with the divine that was so staggeringly intimate, he claimed that between God and the soul, there is absolutely no between. The boundary entirely vanishes. That phrasing, no between, is incredibly powerful.
It strips away the hierarchy. And then, jumping to the 17th century Netherlands, we have the philosopher Baruch Spinoza. He presented a radical monism, this concept of Deus sive natura, which translates to God or nature.
So Spinoza wasn't talking about an old man with a white beard sitting on a cloud, watching us from a distance.
Not at all. Spinoza argued that God is synonymous with the totality of existence itself. He believed that mind and body aren't separate interacting things. They are just two attributes of one single infinite substance.
Okay.
To Spinoza, asking where nature ends and God begins is like asking where the shape of a coin ends and the metal begins. It's a nonsensical question. What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of this cross-cultural consensus.
It's massive.
We are talking about vastly different languages, distinct eras, wildly different religious backgrounds, and separate societal structures. Yet whether they call it Brahman, emptiness, the Tao, the One, or Spinoza's substance, the fundamental truth they all land on is identical. Reality is an undivided whole.
And the separation we feel is just a trick of human perception.
Exactly.
That is a profound historical alignment, but I want to pivot here. Because frankly, knowing that a 17th century Dutch philosopher and an ancient Indian sage agree is cool trivia. But how does this actually help you and me right now?
Right, the practical application.
When I'm stuck in gridlock traffic or my inbox is overflowing, Spinoza doesn't magically lower my blood pressure. Let's bring this to the present. The sources highlight an incredible wave of contemporary teachers trying to translate these dense concepts into highly practical tools.
The modern translation is crucial because these contemporary non-dual teachers emphasize lived experience over intellectual theory. It can't just be a thought experiment. Take Swami Sarvapriyananda and Rupert Spira, for instance. They both lean heavily on a beautifully relatable analogy, the ocean.
Oh, I love this one.
If you stand on the beach and look out, you see a multiplicity of individual waves. You can point to them, measure their height, and watch them crash. But fundamentally, there is no such thing as wave independent of the ocean. It's just the ocean waving.
Spira takes that ocean analogy and applies it directly to our internal psychological lives, right?
He does. He notes that the water of the ocean, which represents our pure awareness, is, in his words, never disturbed by experience.
That's a great phrase.
Think of a wave of intense sadness, or a wave of manic joy, or a wave of workplace stress. The wave takes on a dramatic shape, but the essential wetness of the water doesn't change one bit. Spira argues that we are already the peaceful awareness we seek. We're just chronically distracted by the changing shapes of the waves.
But how do you actually find that undisturbed awareness when the waves are crashing over your head? The notes mention the Indian sage Nisargadatta Maharaj, who had a rather intense, direct approach to this.
Very direct.
He instructed seekers to entirely discard their identification with the body and the mind and to abide purely in the primal, raw sense of I am.
Nisargadatta's method is stripped of all dogma. He said, and I quote, "The I am has brought you in. The I am will take you out. The I am is the door. Stay at it." He's asking you to locate that baseline feeling of simply existing before you add any story to it.
Which is incredibly difficult. My default state is adding the story. I don't just feel I feel I am a person who needs his morning coffee, or I am someone who is behind on deadlines.
Exactly. The mind rushes in.
He's demanding that we strip away every single label that comes after those two words.
That's the practice. Every time the mind tries to attach a condition, I am tired, I'm a listener, I am anxious, you gently drop the condition and return to the pure presence of being. Another contemporary teacher in the sources, Mooji, calls the whole idea of searching for this state a complete illusion.
Because you can't search for what you already are.
Right. You can't find what you never lost. You are already the one self. He advocates for what he calls the pathless path, which is simply dropping into the here-now conscious presence.
I really like that phrase, the pathless path, but it sounds almost too simple, which brings up an interesting critique from another modern teacher, Acharya Prashant. He warns about the trap of the intellect. Prashant insists that all intellectual knowledge is, by its very nature, fundamentally dualistic.
It's a brilliant observation. Think about the mechanics of learning. To know something intellectually, you need a subject who knows and an object that is known. The very act of conceptualizing automatically splits reality in two.
Right, the act of labeling slices the world up. If I label a situation as good, I've instantly created the shadow concept of bad.
Exactly.
Prashant says labeling things, whether it's categorizing people by gender, dividing the world into self versus other, or pitting desire against fear, just chops reality into imagined halves. He states, quite provocatively, there is only one duality, called duality.
It forces you to realize that whether you are agonizing over a massive career choice, feeling isolated from your neighbors, or feeling disconnected from nature, the root mechanism causing the suffering is identical. It's the mind cutting the universe into pieces and then stressing out about the pieces.
Wow.
True understanding, for these teachers, means shifting out of conceptual knowing and stepping into direct, nonverbal experience.
I want to pause and ask you, the listener, what stands out to you here? Because the common thread among all these modern teachers is that non-duality cannot just be treated as a fun mental puzzle to solve while commuting.
No, it can't.
If it stays in your intellect, it's just another form of duality. You thinking about a concept. It has to be lived directly in the messy reality of your daily life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what's truly remarkable in the research stack is how modern science is increasingly mirroring this ancient lived wisdom. It's no longer just mystics in caves talking about an interconnected whole. It's physicists in laboratories.
The scientific parallels are staggering. The notes highlight James Clerk Maxwell in the 19th century. Electricity and magnetism used to be considered entirely separate, unrelated forces.
Right.
Maxwell proved they are actually unified into a single electromagnetic field. And then Einstein comes along and merges time and space into one continuum. Space-time.
But the ultimate scientific metaphor for non-duality has to be quantum mechanics. At the quantum level, the rigid classical boundary between the observer and the observed completely breaks down.
It just dissolves.
The universe reveals itself to be fundamentally participatory. It's exactly what the ancient texts claimed. A seamless, undivided whole where the observer and the experiment are intimately interpenetrating.
So what does this all mean for your daily life? How does a grand unified framework backed by quantum physics and ancient sages actually change your Tuesday afternoon? Let's dive into the psychology research. The sources mention transpersonal psychology. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Transpersonal psychology is a branch of psychology that moves beyond the personal, individual ego to study our spiritual interconnectedness. Along with secular mindfulness, it uses non-dual attention as a highly effective tool for reducing fear and anxiety.
How does that work in practice? If I'm terrified of failing a project at work, how does a non-dual perspective help me?
When you begin to view your personal identity not as a rigid, fragile thing that must be constantly defended against the world, but as something fluid, and when you recognize that your passing thoughts of failure are just transient waves on the ocean, the egocentric mindset deeply relaxes.
So you stop fighting the waves.
Exactly. You literally shift your psychological baseline from an isolated I consciousness fighting for survival to a deeply interconnected we consciousness.
Which takes a massive amount of pressure off your shoulders. If you aren't this isolated, separate ego constantly battling a hostile universe, the baseline level of fear just naturally dials down. And according to the ecological research in our stack, that internal shift has massive external consequences, especially regarding empathy.
It fundamentally rewires empathy. Recognizing that there is no true separation means realizing that being benevolent to others is literally being benevolent to oneself. There is no actual other. Recent studies on environmental psychology highlight that a felt sense of oneness directly correlates with pro-environmental attitudes.
Let me clarify that, because often environmentalism is framed as a moral obligation. You're supposed to recycle because you should feel guilty if you don't. Does non-duality replace that guilt?
Completely. If you see a forest or a river or even your local neighborhood, not as a separate resource to be exploited or managed, but as a literal extension of your own being, compassion isn't a chore.
It's just self-care at that point.
Exactly. It isn't a moral duty you have to force upon yourself. It flows naturally. You wouldn't deliberately cut off your own hand, so why would you pollute your own extended body?
That reframes the entire ecological crisis. It moves the motivation from fear and guilt into a profound sense of shared identity.
This unified philosophy offers a very real, tangible way to navigate the extreme political and social polarization of the modern world. When you stop seeing your neighbor as a fundamental other, the hostility dissolves.
Let's tie all these diverse threads together. We've journeyed from ancient India and China to modern physics laboratories, and from the quiet meditations of mystics to the clinical studies of transpersonal psychologists.
It's been quite the journey.
The core takeaway tying this entire deep dive together is this: whether you label it Brahman, emptiness, the Tao, the One, or simply pure consciousness, ultimate reality is non-dual. There is only one happening. All the boundaries, all the labels, all the divisions we obsess over are entirely provisional.
Provisional, yes.
They are incredibly useful for navigating a grocery store or building a bridge, but they aren't the ultimate foundational truth of who you are.
It's crucial to add a final note on integration here. Embracing this philosophy doesn't mean you just sit on a meditation cushion, declare the world an illusion, and ignore your responsibilities.
Right, you don't just quit your job and wander into the woods.
It's not about checking out of society. Instead, the sources point to a beautifully balanced middle way. This perspective allows you to face the stress of your career, the polarization of politics, and the urgency of ecological crises by acting vigorously in the world, while always remembering our shared source. You can play your character in the movie with passion, while quietly knowing you are the screen.
I love that. You engage with the illusion without being trapped by it. And to help you anchor this into your actual experience, I want to leave you with a mind-expanding question to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We talked earlier about quantum mechanics and the observer effect.
We did.
So try this. Next time you look at an object in front of you, pay close attention to the actual act of looking. Based on everything we've explored today, ask yourself, is the thing you are observing truly separate from your awareness of it? Or are you and the object simply two temporary waves crashing in the exact same ocean?
That is a beautiful thought to end on. It brings the entire massive framework right back into the present moment. Thank you for exploring this profound topic with us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep observing, and we will catch you on the next one.